Welcome to the first episode of Live Lab Studio Sessions. We are broadcasting live from the Future Fabrik studio in Leipzig, introducing new and inspiring artists from Leipzig and beyond. I'm Jule, one of your hosts this evening, and I'm really excited because today we have a very inspiring guest. He is a professor for work and organizational psychology at the Technical University of Chemnitz, and his research is focused on the consequences of the fusion of human and technology. Also, he examines stereotypes against people with physical disabilities. And also, he has a strong passion for electronic music, and this movement, turning a knob of a synthesizer, is quite difficult for him. And that's the reason why he found a very innovative way to make music. Welcome, Professor Dr. Bertolt Meyer.
Thank you. Thank you, Jule, for having me.
It's nice to have a little chat with you. Bertolt, you have a strong passion for electronic music in general and also for making music. That's the reason why you are here. You recently released your first EP, and you use especially the modular synthesizer for live sets and also for music productions. We're going to talk about that later, and also we're going to listen to your music later, which I'm really looking forward to. But there's one specialty which might hinder you to use the filigree synthesizer with its tiny knobs and buttons. You were born without your left forearm, and you wear a very special and very expensive prosthesis. Can you tell us what is a bionic prosthesis which you wear?
Well, okay, the prosthesis that I'm wearing, well, bionic is a big word, you know. It's modeled after the basic functionality of the human hand, and this was actually the first company that succeeded in making one where actually all the fingers can move. You can really make a fist, and you can rotate the wrist. So the party trick is that this goes all the way.
That's really cool.
It's not very useful, that, but you know, just as an illustration. And yeah, so it's not a replacement for a natural human hand. You know, you can't play the piano with it, which is something that I ideally miss. But it's great for little everyday activities that make all the difference, like riding a bicycle, tying your shoelaces, preparing a meal, for these sort of things. And the way it works is there's two electrodes that are built into the socket of the prosthesis, and they pick up muscle signals, electrical signals from the muscles on the surface of the skin. So there's two electrodes in here, and with those you flex the muscle in the residual limb, and then the prosthesis moves. But you're right, it's difficult because it can't do kind of this movement. So it's actually difficult to turn anything that has little knobs with it. Yeah, that's true.
And was it really hard to learn, like, the movements? Was it very difficult?
It was, actually. I was 19 when I was fitted with a prosthesis that works like this for the first time. And until then, I hadn't worn a prosthesis like this. And the thing is, the muscle that you need to use to create these signals that the prosthesis will understand is the muscle that you would normally use to flex the wrist, like this. But the thing is, if you don't have a hand, if you were born without a hand, this is a muscle that you have never used before. So I had to learn to use this muscle for the first time when I was 19. And that was difficult, because my brain didn't know this muscle. And the way this works is they give you a device that gives you a visual feedback. So you just do something until you see a little spike on the device, and then you go like, okay, and then you practice and practice and practice.
And you practice every day, probably.
Well, but I mean, I think it took, I don't know, I think I had this training device for maybe 3 months or so. And then I was fitted with my first prosthesis that employs this control strategy. And of course, it's still learning. It's like learning an instrument, really. You're never perfect, right? It always gets better. It's the same for me.
Yeah. I saw you DJing with vinyl, I mean, which is quite difficult, isn't it?
It is.
But is there anything you can't really, is it like do you have any problems which you really can't do, which is very difficult for you?
Well, there's nothing that is important to me in my life that I cannot do. Of course, there are things that I can't do. You know, I'm not going to become a goldsmith. I'm not going to be a professional mountain climber.
Okay.
But that's fine, right? That's nothing I aspire to. Talking about playing with vinyl, it is difficult to beat match with a prosthesis. I can do it, but it takes a long time. I probably need 1:30 to properly beat match with vinyl, and it's actually quite stressful, I think. So I feel much more comfortable with CDJs in front of an audience.
Okay, but is there anything which you can do what I can't do, like destroying a bottle of beer or something?
No,
because you have like a very tight.
It's interesting. Like people always assume that you have some kind of superpower when you wear a prosthesis like this. You really don't. I mean, you have a firm handshake, but it's a hand that's made of flesh and blood is stronger than a hand like this. There's something that I can do that you can't do, and that is I can rotate the wrist 360 degrees until the battery is empty. It's not very useful, but it shows that potentially the prosthesis can do something. And of course, I can do something with that little hack we built. That is, I can directly connect the prosthesis to the modular synthesizer and use it to send control signals into that, which is probably a little bit more instantaneous than doing it by hand.
Okay, talk about it that later. And in your research, your main subject is to kind of get rid of prejudices against physical disabilities, and in numerous interviews and publications you create an awareness for stigmatization. Would you describe your research at university as a form of activism against validism?
That's an interesting question. So first of all, I wouldn't say that our research is targeted at doing away with stereotypes, because that might be a very unrealistic goal, because stereotypes are very, very automatic. They're deeply ingrained in our brain, in our consciousness. Well, not really in our consciousness, because stereotypes are something that really operates on a subconscious level. But stereotypes affect the way we behave and also how we behave towards one another. It's difficult to do something against stereotypes, but it's easier to do something against discrimination, because discrimination is a behavior that stems from stereotypes. So it's easier to fight discrimination than to fight stereotypes, because people can learn to observe their behavior and to question their behavior, to check whether my behavior is the result of stereotypes or something else. And that's something that we're striving for. But to answer your question, yes, I do definitely see myself as an activist, because I do research about something that is, that is very dear to me, and it's that also that I experience myself. There is for example, one study that we conducted is about how prostheses change stereotypes towards people with physical disabilities, because people with physical disabilities are typically looked down upon. They're perceived as friendly but incompetent. It's a kind of, oh, can I help you? But it's with good intention, but it implies this top down. It implies a hierarchy. And I hate this when people offer help for something that I do not need help with, because it always shows you that other people see you as less competent than you actually are, which is the stigma.
I had actually this moment when you ate the pizza. We ate some pizza beforehand, and you ate some pizza, and you wanted to separate one piece from another, and I thought, should I ask him to help? No.
It was the pizza's fault. You would have struggled with that pizza as well. No, but seriously, but food is a good example. My husband and I and the in-laws, so the four of us, we went for a fancy dinner just a couple of months ago, and it was a fancy restaurant. The in-laws were paying, and we all had the same menu. So we all had the main course, and the main course was some meat, like a steak, and then the waiter comes with the food, and only on my plate they had cut the steak into small bits and pieces without asking. No, it was only on my, and it was with good intention, right?
Yeah.
Because apparently the waiter had observed that I was wearing a prosthesis, and he thought, he can't cut the steak, so I'll do it for him.
Yeah.
But of course, to me, this comes across as an insult because I'm very, very able to operate fork and knife. I mean, this is what this expensive prosthesis is good for, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, you can just ask.
Yeah.
But, just assuming.
Yeah.
And it's, the singular instance is not such a big deal. But, the frequency of such occasions, the ubiquitousness, it teaches you something. You learn something. And you learn that society views you as, as less. And I am saying this from a very, very privileged perspective, right? I'm like my disability is very, very minor in comparison to what other people have to face, and also I'm in a very, very comfortable, privileged situation as a tenured university professor to speak about these things. So I am in no way representative for the majority of what people with physical disabilities face. However, I think I have a passion for this issue and for the subject, and that's why I enjoy doing research about it.
Yeah. But wasn't it that your studies showed that people with bionic prostheses are perceived in a different way, like very competent? Like
yes.
In the opposite way.
Indeed. Our study finds that modern prostheses have the ability to offset some of the stigma that is associated with physical disability.
Yeah.
So in that sense, our study shows that a prosthesis like this not only has a functional benefit, but it also has a psychological benefit in the sense of that if you have a disability like myself and you wear a prosthesis, people stigmatize you less. It doesn't fully compensate, but you're perceived as almost as competent as able-bodied individuals. That's what our study shows. And now the question is, of course, why is this the case? How does the design of the prosthesis play into that? And all sorts of other questions that we're researching as part of a collaborative research center we have at our universities called Hybrid Societies, where we investigate these things.
Okay, that's really interesting, and also like you kind of transfer all those messages in the music you make, and music is a very strong communication field. On one hand, you can bring very strong messages to your audience, and on the other side, you reach a bunch of people from very different backgrounds.
True.
So you became kind of a role model for making music. Okay, maybe, but you are a role model for making music despite having a handicap, because you made a very, very cool invention. Can you tell us about your invention? Yeah,
so, I try to finish blushing first, which only works so. Okay, well, though. I discovered the modular synthesizer as an instrument that I'm really, really passionate about. It's just something that I feel a very strong bond with for whatever reason. The thing with these modular synthesizers is they have so many little knobs that you need to tweak, and it's difficult to tweak these knobs with a prosthesis like this. But the thing is, with modular synthesizers, next to each knob there is a little input jack that will accept a voltage, a so-called control voltage in the range of, I don't know, 0 to 10 volts or something. And with this voltage you can remote control the knobs, basically. So instead of turning the knob, you can just send in a voltage. So here I am sitting in front of the synthesizer, trying desperately to kind of tweak the knobs with my prosthesis. And I think, okay, this is really dumb, because so my prosthesis picks up an electrical signal here, turns it into a mechanical movement there, that I'm then trying to use to turn a knob that I could as well remote control with an electric signal. So can't I just skip the middle part and just take the electricity from here and send it directly into the synthesizer? And I'm not an engineer, but I think I have as like a good hobbyist knowledge of electronics. When I was a teenager, I had these electronic hobbyist things, and I built remote controlled ships, whatever, geeky. But I can use a soldering iron, and I have a basic understanding of how a circuit works. I had a very, very old prosthesis, a prosthetic hand lying around at home that was broken that I didn't use anymore. I took it apart until I just had the bit left that plugs into the socket of the prosthesis, and then I used my multimeter to see if I can find the signals from the electrodes, and I succeeded. And then I started to design a very simple circuit that would kind of translate these signals into signals that the synthesizer will understand. And that was very difficult until I met Christian Zollner, Krisi, who's the owner and mastermind of Koma Elektronik. It's a synthesizer electronics music company based in Berlin. And they have a device. They do also all sorts of great and crazy devices. Anyways, and they have a device that has a circuit built in that I thought was very much exactly the circuit that I needed. And so out of the blue, I sent him an email. I mean, I didn't know him. I just sent him an email and said, look, I'm this person. I'm trying to hack my arm prosthesis so that it outputs control signals that I can send to the synthesizer. Yeah. And I think you have a circuit design there that I could use. Could you maybe send me the schematics of the circuit? And he replied within 5 minutes along the lines of, oh my God, that's such a crazy idea. Of course, here's the circuit board. And then we got in touch. I threw together a very crude prototype on a kind of one of these strip PCB boards that you can buy at Konrad Elektronik, and soldered it together. And to my absolute amazement, it worked. And then Krisi was excited about it as well and said, but let me do it a little better. And he miniaturized the design, and he actually designed a proper PCB, a proper bit of electronics. And he had that etched at the plant where he had all his electronics made in China somewhere, I assume. Anyway, sent it back. We ordered all the parts that we needed. I soldered it together, and then my husband Daniel, he's a wizard with a 3D printer because he's an architect turned artist. And this is the crude prototype that we built. Again, this is really only a prototype. As you can see, there's cables hanging out of it. And we are in stage of designing a second version. But long story short, you can remove the hand, attach this to the prosthesis instead of the hand. And as you can see here, there's 2 connectors, and you can plug in the cables there. And
so that's a connection from the synthesizer to the SynLim.
SynLim, yeah. This is the iLimb, this is the SynLim. So the synthesizer limb, yeah, I know.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting shape though, because you have this very slim tip to push the buttons,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. We need to give it a bit of a mechanical use as well, so that you can still push a button with it. Again, you can't really tweak something very well with a prosthesis, so we didn't even bother, because that's what the outputs are for, right? Yeah. For doing it electronically, but you can still use it to push buttons, so that you get the best of both worlds.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I'll put it on before I go over to the synths and try and play some.
Yeah, you can also put it on.
Well, fine. Okay. Well, then, okay. If you insist. So, I have to warn you though, it does look a little bit awkward. So the way you screw this off, and it pops, and then it pops off, and then so you can put this on.
That's quite heavy though.
Yeah. You can. Okay. And so there's I don't know if you can see this. So there's a control LED here. It shows that the power's on, and then see there's these 2 LEDs up here that will kind of show that something is coming out of the CV jacks. And this is and the knobs here are just you can set the offset and the strength of the amplification.
Okay.
That's really all there is to it. Yeah.
So you basically control the parameters of the synthesizer by your thoughts, or is it more in muscle activity, as you said, because it reacts on your muscle activity?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, for me, it's kind of the same thing.
Okay.
Because of course, I mean, technically, the only thing I'm doing is I'm flexing a muscle, and there is an electrode on the surface of the skin that picks up the electric signal that the muscle produces. So you're right. I'm just flexing a muscle. Mm-hmm. And I'm not the first person who has had the idea to control a synthesizer with muscle signals. There's actually a Eurorack module on the market by a wonderful Portuguese synthesizer company called ADAC, ADDAC, ADAC Systems. And they have a module, it's called Muscle Sense, and you can connect a medical electrode to it, like they use in the hospital when they measure your heart rate. And you can, stick that somewhere on your body, plug it into the synth, and something will happen. The thing with me is, I don't have to think about flexing these muscles because I do that hundreds of times every day whenever I move my prosthesis.
Yeah.
And that has become second nature to me in the sense that, you don't think about which muscles you have to flex when you open and close your hand. And the same applies to me on a more basic level, that I don't have to think about flexing a muscle in my residual limb here or there when I intend to open and close my prosthesis. I just do it. And that is why it feels so effortless for me to do this, because of my disability, I have learned to produce these signals kind of as second nature.
Okay. And is this like, how precise can you control the parameters?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I am very precise in terms of timing, in terms of right now. But what I still struggle with is the subtleties, because basically this is an analog signal. So the signal that comes out of the syn limb is proportionate to the strength of the muscle impulse. However, when you learn to use a prosthesis like this, you are trained to produce very strong signals that are very separate. So either on one side of the arm or on the other, but never on both simultaneously, because the prosthesis has difficulties when it happens at the same time, because one is opening and the other one is closing. So they need to be separate. So what I've learned for the past 20 years or so is to produce strong and separate signals, whereas for the synth, it would actually be better to produce like more nuanced signals, and also to do that simultaneously. So basically, for using the syn limb, I kind of have to unlearn what I learned for controlling the arm prosthesis. And that is why, at this point, I'm not comfortable with using this, for example, for controlling the pitch of a melody, because I'm just not very good at hitting the right pitch. Like in front of an audience, what I feel comfortable with at the moment is to use these signals to control parameters that need to be either on or off, and come quickly, but not long, more like triggers.
Like a kick.
Yeah, look, for example, like a switch, like for example, like in the setup that I'm currently using, most of the time I will use these cables for switching on and off the kick, for changing the decay of a hi-hat, and for influencing filter cutoffs. That's that at the moment are my prime, which is still pretty good to to have assigned that and still have another hand free to do something else.
Yeah. And do you have any plans to increase the possibilities you have with the syn limb?
Oh yeah, definitely. And those plans primarily evolve around the next iteration of the syn limb. That Kothe and I, we've been designing this for more than a year now. Time is an issue always, and also parts shortage at the moment is a huge issue as well, because Kothe in his work is very much thrown back and stressed by the fact that he can't get the parts for the synthesizers that he needs to sell.
Oh really?
Yeah,
okay.
it's terrible.
Right.
Anyways,
yeah.
So the idea with the syn limb 2, or the next iteration of it, first of all, it will look cooler. It will feature like proper LED bars that give a better visualization, which will be better for training. But also, we're planning to give it Bluetooth capabilities. There's another great, very innovative young modular synth electronics startup. They're called Instruments of Things. They're in Bremen, and they have a module that connects to motion sensors via Bluetooth. And we talk with them, and we design the new board of the new syn limb such that it can take in their Bluetooth transmitter that can then piggyback on that one, so that we can actually transmit the signal wireless. And then, like, a lot of new possibilities open, not only for controlling the synth, but maybe for controlling parameters, for example, on the computer. No, why not use this for advancing the slides on a PowerPoint presentation, for example?
That's an idea. Yeah.
Or there's something else I've been working on, and that is controlling video games. Actually, with this, there is for the Xbox. There's the adaptive controller that features analog inputs, so that people with various physical disabilities can design devices to. Long story short, you can plug in the SynLib into that, and I don't know, control parts of the video game.
That's cool.
Yeah,
so many possibilities. I think. Yeah. You quite recently, in August last year, released your first EP on the quite new label Dessert Berlin, which is and was originally a party series of Berlin's Club About Blank, where you DJ sometimes. And your EP is called Walks the Night, and on the B side you have a very soul-y, ecstatic house track, which I really like. I'm sure it has a very catchy sample, and I'm sure it works quite well on the dance floor. How did it feel to make your first EP after the long time of pandemic?
Oh, amazing, of course. And it was weird that it coincided with a pandemic, because of course that wasn't planned. I mean, I have been DJing for quite a few years, but the transition into my own music production was a slow one, which I think a lot of people who transition from just DJing into producing can relate to. You know, I've been a bedroom producer for a couple of years, you know, doing semi-okay tracks here and there and putting them on my SoundCloud, really. But, you know, I think persistence is key, and this is something that I kept at, and I, you know, invested a lot of time in, because it's just a fun thing to do, to create your own music. And I was very lucky through the power of social media. Tom, who runs the dessert party in About Blank, and who now also runs the label, he saw some of my stuff on the internet, and he sent me a message on Instagram saying, "Look, you know, I thought it's interesting what you do, and is there anything that you are working on? Can you send me some demos? You know, I'm about to start a new label focusing on melodic techno mainly." And I said, "Yeah, in fact, I have something that I've been working on," and I sent him over a track. He liked it. This was Walks the Night. And we picked one of my B-sides, and Tom had a producer who helped, you know, the finishing touches, and also at the time the demos, they were actually produced by Mark, who actually runs here the Future Fabrik.
Oh, okay.
So my first EP is also thanks to his wonderful production work. And then I was very, very lucky that Tom was able to get Hannes Bieger as a remixer for Walks the Night. And Hannes Bieger, he's a melodic house and techno producer, and you know, I just love his work. And he works so wonderfully with his synths. He has these old modular setups, not the Eurorack format, the big old Moog format is amazing. And you know, I'm an avid follower of his music, and it was absolutely amazing that he agreed to do a remix for Walks the Night, which helped it get a little bit of exposure. And so yeah, it's been amazing. It was a little bit unfortunate that it came out in August, just before the last Corona wave, I guess, hit, which then led to closure of the clubs. And when was this? September, October-ish, when everything closed down again, and just reopened now. But so yeah, I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm just very, very happy that finally it's taking some more serious shapes.
Yeah, that sounds really good, and we'd love to hear some of your music. Maybe now it's the time.
Yeah,
that we
no,
that
absolutely.
We can listen to
yeah,
your music.
sure. Yeah. Let's.
And we have the honor to get a preview of your second EP, which will be released quite soon.
Yeah, well, yes. I have the last track that I'm going to play in my little set I prepared about half an hour. will be a live version of the B-side of my new EP. It's called Delta Drift, and yeah, let's see how it goes. I did prepare a little bit of a live set, so
okay, perfect.
I'll just try and make that work.
Yeah. Okay. Good luck.
Thank you.
And Bertolt's music, you can also listen to Bertolt's music at SoundCloud and on YouTube as well, and
on Spotify.
And on Spotify, of course. So, let's check it out. And here's an exclusive live performance from the Future Fabrik in Leipzig. We see Bertolt Meyer at Live Lab Studio Sessions.
Down, down, down. Mic's on.
Woo. Maybe this much for the time being. Oh,
Bertie.
thank you,
my
Mark.
friend.
Oh,
That was amazing.
thank you. Woo.
Awesome.
Ooh.
Buzzing.
I never cease to be excited. Stage fright is always real.
It's great to see. Before I forget though, there's so many questions. The penultimate track, when that started playing, some crazy super low bass thing going on. What's that? What's that coming from? Was that intentional or was that a happy accident?
That was probably a happy accident.
Right.
Yeah, but I
impressive
think,
though.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I know what it was. It was a filter that wasn't quite closed, and it was getting some CV on the filter envelope,
Right.
so it kind of bounced it.
It was
but
definitely
also
making the sub here work really hard, which is a good thing. And then also in that track, a bit later on, this FM, almost chippy FM thing.
Yes.
Those were, I think, from the whole set. There's a lot, but those two sounds.
And thank you so much. And you're perfectly right. The chippy stuff was actually both FM. I have two oscillators in this setup that both receive some frequency modulation stuff. The one is a little bit rarer. It's a weird Canadian thingy called the Kilpatrick Audio.
Okay.
I don't even know what it is.
Scottish Canadian.
Probably. Probably.
Yeah.
And then there's here. So in this case here on the left, there is this one gritty kind of FM-ish voice, and this is called the 0-point oscillator, which is perfect for some very weird FM stuff, because the FM with this oscillator can modulate many more things than FM typically does. Sorry, I don't want to geek out straight away.
No, that's what we're here for. So yeah, I mean totally. But this is interesting that I pulled out. But this is the thing about building and having a unique sound. You really do have to kind of, to find these sounds that give you your identity.
Exactly.
You have to kind of get into this, this sound design, which on a computer is one thing, and on a module it's another thing. But ultimately, it's a signal path, right? It's how we're modulating or controlling or manipulating one signal with another.
In the end, this is all just one huge signal path, or a couple of those. But yeah, they are. Yeah.
Several. I mean, where to start with all of this stuff? I mean, have you got anything here that's like particularly, specially? I mean, to do. Ignore the hand. Stop showing off. But anything that's was particularly chosen for this rig because of the way that you can interact with it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, and that is a module that's relatively new, and it's relatively weird, and it's relatively special, and it's
perfect for you then.
So a big shout out to the Droid module, made by Der Mann mit der Maschine.
Okay, that looks extremely cool as well. Can you get in on this, Flo, or are you?
So what this is a CV processor.
I have to be careful not to touch the tuning knobs.
No, in general, yes, but in this particular instance, the thing with it is, see, there's only input jacks and output jacks here, and then these lights, and really no controls at all. There are some controls here on the right, but the thing is, it has this SD card slot, and it has its own programming language. So you can actually write a little program on the computer that tells the module what to do. So basically, it's a blank module if you want.
Is that a bespoke thing, or is it like Python or some other kind of script, or is it?
He invented his own scripting language for that thing. And with that, I built some scripts that work particularly well with the CV that my Prosthesis is doing. For example, this taking the bass out and back in again. I have trouble. Exactly. I have trouble with maintaining a gate, like a high signal, for a longer period of time, because the muscles wear out and it will eventually decay.
Like holding a heavy board or something, right? Okay.
Exactly like that. And at some point, the bass will come back in, although I don't want it. And with this, I could kind of program a little bit of a safety around it.
Okay.
So without that, it wouldn't work.
I mean, is that then like kind of what I imagine the limitations of this that you talked about earlier, where you've got a range of movement, and it's responsive to a degree of electrical signal that's then, I imagine, very much like the shady pots on the Juno. You've got like a lot of movement, but there's only really the bit between here and here where the business is, and you don't have...
Exactly. And it's very difficult to get a good control within that little window where the things are happening. So that's a very good analogy. Yeah.
Cool. So this then enables you to kind of work with much more definitive trigger signals,
Absolutely.
and then make it do all kinds of crazy
And I
stuff.
can basically, as you can see by just the bunch of cables that come out of it, it's really the brain of this rack. It serves as envelope generator. It does some random stuff. I programmed some LFOs in it. It's a marvelous module.
Okay. That's fascinating. So, but also a computer, basically.
And that kind of, but I'm not, saying it's not really analog.
Right?
Oh
no,
sorry, I wasn't implying that
I don't care.
Yeah.
What comes out of the jack at the end is what's kind of really important.
Yeah.
Whether it's analog or digital, is a discussion that's, I think, well past its due date, because they both give you different options.
Yes.
Right. And,
exactly.
And this is a brilliant example of something that you wouldn't possibly be able to achieve if you were Alan Turing and you could build a mechanical machine that could maybe do that, but maybe not something that you could schlep around in a 19-inch rack. So. Yeah, cool. I mean, I'm familiar with some of your gear. I've seen some of it at shows before. The mixer here, as you say, is
I've
old
had that for a long time. Yeah.
And you love slugging around massive 8-channel
It's one of the few mixers for modular that gives you a clean, balanced XLR output, which for a stage context can be life-saving in comparison to a noisy little RCA or 3.5 millimeter.
I mean, I'm looking for a loose cable end, but there aren't any here. But it's like, can I plug my function one? Can I disconnect you from the no. But yes, can I plug my rig in? And you've got a 3.5 mil.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
well, I mean, people do that, but for me, it's really important to be able to. Well, this is a mobile setup. I know it looks very big, and it does come in smaller flavors. It's actually a modular setup in the sense of, as you know, my background is in DJing, so this is really the approach that I took here in the sense of this is one deck, if you want. So this is one synthesizer that's self-contained in itself. It has a couple of voices and a drum section, and it's controlled with this sequencer. And this is another completely independent synth with everything it needs, voices, drums, and it's controlled by this sequencer. And the cool thing is they have different characteristics. You can also hear them. This is more dark and gritty, and this is more little bright and poppy.
This has got the darker and the FME stuff going on.
Exactly. So the idea is, of course, to also be able to get an hour of stuff out of this just on its own. And it's totally possible. But this gives you more options. And also, to be honest, it gives you a little bit more security, because you're really only playing one of the synth at a time and can switch parameters in the other one that is not playing.
Also like a backup as well, I guess. It's
exactly.
like the second deck.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's basically how you're rocking it then. You've got you've got essentially two sequencer synthesizer groove boxes, and then you're mixing between them.
Exactly. And the thing is, I bring my own mixer. I mean, there's a lot of people who play live. There's a wonderful DJ, is that a word? Can I say that? I know Helene's Lady Starlight, and she's also
apparently it's not called
a modular. I apologize. Okay, so there's a wonderful artist. I've met her once. Her name is Lady Starlight, and she also plays with modular in a club environment. And she will just ask for a separate, Ellen Heath, one of those with 6 channels, and then she'll just go in there. But I kind of prefer bringing your own mixer, so everything that you have to give someone where you play, it's just a stereo out and that's it.
Yeah, and it's all on you then.
And the thing is also, with this tiny mixer, I mean, if I'm not shaking as much as I was when I was performing live, the thing is, there are these, the sliders, they're really small, and I can actually place the
you can rest your...
Yeah, I can rest it in there and give him a little push and also draw him backwards. So for my...
for your particular way of interacting, it's better, right?
It is, yeah.
Cool. You have probably got arguably definitely more precision with that thing than your average spludging finger.
Well, I mean, for doing the kick in and out, yes, but I was so nervous when I just played. That was the point. When I wanted to adjust the volume just a little bit, and I yanked it down way too much, and I was like, shoot.
Yeah. But this is the beauty of doing it live. Yeah. If it was perfect, then you may as well just put a CD on.
And if it works, if it doesn't fall apart in the middle, which there's always a risk that it does, it's just so much fun. It's just so much fun. I just really, really deeply enjoy doing this.
Evidently. Evidently, and good. Again, the Torize, or Torize, I don't even know, that's quite sure how that's pronounced, but This is new to your setup.
Right, it's relatively new. It's actually made by Pioneer. So
Yeah, I've seen it on Pioneer.
Yeah, it's
Tour show.
so Torres is kind of, I guess, a subline that's more aimed at people who play
They've got this squid
live.
thing as well. There's a couple of
This is the
kind of
squid.
in the, oh, this is the squid.
This is the squid.
Ah,
This is
okay.
the Torres squid. Yeah.
So the okay. So now, yeah.
Yeah, Torres is
The
is a
dots are
Pioneer
joined.
brand, and there's a squid. It's a it's a 16-track sequencer. It has its limitations, and also it's really borderline large. I mean, it's really huge, but it is such a great performative tool in the sense it can do something that no other other sequencer that I came across can do, and that is while it's playing, you can basically halt a note and say, repeat this note on a fourth note, or maybe an eighth or a 16th,
Right.
which is not so special in itself, but then you can also make that a triplet or a dotted triplet, and that gives this this kind of, and so you can kind of, in your track, without having to
you've got like-
pre-program it,
Okay.
you can change the rhythmical structure, and on top of that, you can transpose live, which is what I'm actually doing sometimes. And that, although you kind of have a pre-made track or pre-made patterns running, this is perfect for manipulating them even further by changing their rhythmical signature on the fly in a live environment. And because all the buttons are so big, it's really good to play in an environment like this. So actually, it grew on me after a while.
And it also works as a standalone groove box?
No,
No,
no, it's just it's a MIDI hardware sequencer.
Purely
yeah,
a
it's
sequencer.
purely MIDI sequencer. Yeah.
Okay, crazy.
That's what I thought when I saw it.
Yeah.
I was very drunk when I bought it, when I ordered it. Do you know that I have this, like, sometimes when I'm really drunk, I make these spontaneous
What they call
purchases on the internet.
These impulse buying.
Yeah.
It's like going shopping when you're hungry. Yeah. Suddenly you need a lot more stuff.
Yeah, suddenly you need another sequencer.
But you're happy with it, and
Yeah.
this kind of, because I had some experience years back when I first started producing with classic kind of dial-in MIDI sequencers, and obviously not really massive amount of love for that process.
And actually, this
and
is
I
what
always
it
was
is,
kind
right?
of scared of these things because I thought, well, I've got, Ableton does it. I just draw the notes in and I don't have to like go through rows and rows of data and edit stuff. But what's your kind of workflow with this? I mean, do you perform a lot of stuff in live, or are you more of a programmer? You'll kind of sit down and program sequences in?
It's back and forth. So what I will typically do is just sit at home with the hardware sequencers and just play around with the sequencers, because the great thing about these sequencers is, you're right, it's absolutely terrible to dial in a sequence, but they all have some little bit of music theory built in, some knowledge of which chord progressions work well and stuff. They all have great arpeggiators, and they all have some sort of randomness built in them as well that can help you by adding some random elements. So what I will typically do is play around until I find something that I like, build on it. And like the 2 tracks that I played today from this sequencer, I built them completely on the sequencer. They don't even exist in my computer yet.
Right.
One of them does. And what I will typically do at some point when I'm happy is I will record the MIDI into Ableton. And then I will use then I will arrange the track properly in Ableton, add some more variations that this can't do, then play it back again to the modulars, record the individual tracks, and then that gives me a track in Ableton to work on.
Okay,
to
you
polish
don't then
and to send it to you.
You don't then bring that back into here. So then you're using those kind of raw elements directly from the squid or the pyramid.
Yeah.
It's only when you go through the production process then that you would put them into the computer and feed them back to the...
Indeed, although the pyramid...
any particular reason for that? Because I know that your process, from what I understand from seeing some of your projects, is very much play it and record and then get your elements, kind of classic tracking,
I'll actually take that as a compliment. To be honest, I struggle like everybody else struggles with finishing tracks, and so for me, each track has 2 separate lives. It starts basically on a hardware sequencer. At some point, I will record them in Ableton, into Ableton, and then arrange them into a proper track, as far as my skill set allows me to, because I'm definitely not a perfect Ableton producer. But then the track on the hardware sequencer lives on in the live situation. So when I play a version of a track that I have released or plan to release live, it's always different.
Always a version.
It's always a version. It's never the exact same thing unless, you know, you hit play on a CDJ.
Okay,
so, yeah.
Which is interesting actually because, well, again, I guess if you were a fanatical fan of somebody and you listened to the album and you knew the track inside out, and then you listened to you went to a live gig, you're obviously going to hear a different thing. But whether the experience is more or less is, I think, totally a question of where you're coming at it from.
Oh no,
right?
absolutely. But the thing is, you know, I still DJ, and I mean that is you play a finished track and that's it, basically. You know, with certain variations. With this, I never press play and have 7 minutes of MIDI data running through. My tracks are just arranged as what we would in Ableton call sequences. So just little.
Well, we talked about this before,
patterns.
didn't we? So scenes, basically.
Yeah, scenes. Sorry, not
is,
sequences. Scenes, right? Scenes.
So
it's just
an
you know,
arrangement
sets of patterns that are
yeah.
playing at the moment, and I decide in the moment when to advance to the next pattern or maybe go back and so forth. So it's still much more of a live thing. Yeah, I'm not playing random notes that are generated on the spot. I am playing recorded MIDI notes. That is true in terms of loops, but I will combine these loops more or less in a spontaneous way. I mean, I did practice for tonight to hit the 30-minute mark.
Okay, when you did really,
yeah.
really well. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things about performing live in whatever version or assembly of that that you're doing is getting these ideas and trying to replicate them as closely as you can without, like you say, just pressing play. Which for me was always the challenge, because it's this reassurance and the security of having a timeline, of having, I know that the track's going to play out, and I know that over a certain length of time I'm going to get so much in.
That's true, but with a setup like this, you have a little bit of that, right? Because you have your sequences, you know, there is always that break that worked really well the last 5 times I played it. It's still not as much as a safety net that you have when you play with a CDJ. Once, Jonathan and I were playing live at a party here in Leipzig, and so I had all of this set up, and he had his gear. You know, he also played hardware only, his Electron Analog 4 and Octatrack and stuff. So we were like doing this, and then this guy comes up and asks for a track. Yeah, he requests a track, and I'm like, well, do you see a CDJ somewhere?
But and why not? Right? God damn it! You've got all this stuff. Like, why can't you just?
But as you can see, you know, I'm not a keyboard player. There is no keyboard here. I couldn't perform a live.
Okay, that's never anything that you've ever done, even like drum pads and stuff.
Yeah, drum pads. Yeah, no.
It's just
to be honest. I would probably, even if I had 2 arms, I'd be the worst drummer on the planet. Like, I really have trouble with like holding, like my timing, my manual timing, like to do a proper rhythm with feet or hands. It's just terrible. Okay. That's what all this is for, to compensate for my lack of skills.
Okay, timing compensation. I mean, there's obviously much more scope for variation in overall sound. You know, if we're playing something back from a computer-based live set, we can pretty much guarantee that the sound's all going to be the same as when we saved it last time. Here, every time you pack and unpack this stuff, things get unideally a little bit.
It does. I mean, you have to tune these oscillators like you have to tune a guitar, and also all the filter movements and also the volume movements are not recorded anywhere. So all the filter movements and all the level changes I have to do manually. Which is fun, but also a challenge.
It gives you something to do, right?
It really gives you something to do. It's not just, you know, it does. But that's what the mixer is for. Ultimately, the cool thing is that this also has a little built-in mixer itself. So if you take this, I actually have a battery that can power this rack, and I have a small sequencer that has a built-in.
Is this the rack that you used when we did the mobile disco?
No, I didn't have it at the time. It was still this one.
Was this one.
It was this one. But for this one, I now have this external new sequence.
Of course, this is new to you.
I just got this. I just got this like the other week. The Black Box by 1010 Music. It's a full-fledged 16-channel track sampler sequencer groove box.
It's an MPC in a box.
It's an MPC.
Right?
in a box, and you can power it through USB. The sound quality is amazing. The stuff that it can do is amazing. Pair this with a modular synth like this and a little portable a sequencer like the Oxy from Oxy Instruments, very new sequencer, very small, very slim, and it has a built-in battery and lasts for 4 hours. It's just really great. So pack this, a power bank, and another power bank for this, and you can basically play in the park.
That was kind of the lead to that question is what's the incentive for all this portability? I mean, I don't know why I'm asking you that question because I'm like Mr. Mobile Disco, but like from your point of view, because I mean, is battery powered stuff really?
Yeah.
Does it just make it easier at a gig?
No,
Would you use it at
no,
a gig,
no. I like Jonathan and I. We used to just like meet once a week in the park and just jam. And it's just so much fun to do it like somewhere else.
Yeah.
I think really to modular synthesizer, there's two approaches. There's the people who basically build their own home studio with a huge setup for music production, and of course that's not mobile. They're bound to their home. And then there's folks, probably a little bit more like me, who have this idea that this is like an instrument that you're supposed to be able to take somewhere, to play in front of an audience, to play in a different environment, to play in a club. Unless you're Colin Benders, who takes his entire studio onto the stage in a club, but you know, that's an entirely different story.
Yeah, yeah.
There's one gripe I really have about all of this, because the longer you play like this, the more you realize the limits. And what is really a pain with a setup like this is to keep everything properly in sync.
Okay.
Like on beat. If you have several sequences, synths and groove boxes, that is a pain.
Is that why you've got the we were looking at these just the other day, but that's obviously helping towards that aim.
It's no, it's not. No,
is it not?
It is, but helping is not a strong enough word.
Ah, okay.
It's saving everything. Without like the multi-clock makes all of this work, because the thing is, everything that produces, for example, drums, like the wonderful Q'd quad drum by vpme.de, or here the Bitbox, or here the Black Box, they're all synced basically by MIDI. But the thing is, although they receive the same MIDI clock, they have different internal latencies, in the sense of, you know, it will take them a different amount of time to actually output the note after receiving the timing signature. So even in theory, everything is in sync. When you play two kicks, it goes ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Because they're at the same time, yes, but they're not in sync.
There's different internal latencies, there's micro variations in the cable lengths, and there's jitter to concern about.
It's terrible. And then the only thing that is on the market is this brick, which is 500 euros.
Yeah, well, we literally were looking the other day, because obviously you've noticed in here we've started racking up quite a lot of stuff, and synchronization's always an issue.
But it's an absolute lifesaver. Did you?
There are a couple of other options though,
are there?
from what we dug up, but this was the one that was recommended as great but way too expensive.
Like the thing is, like I looked around for I think there's, I don't know, but if your original clock is just a DIN MIDI connector, and that is what everything has to run off, and you don't want to bring a computer, that was the only thing that I found. And actually, when I played, at one point when I went back from this
you did a
to
tempo
that,
change.
See, it's still set
you
to.
You did a tempo change.
But it's not a tempo change. It's just an offset of the clock. So it takes in a clock, it sends out 4 clocks, and each clock, they're all the same speed, but you can offset them a little bit to compensate.
So you can compensate. You are actually using that ever for specific rhythmical?
You can, and actually, I haven't really done that in a live environment, but you can actually add like random shuffle to the MIDI clock, and that can do some very, very interesting things. Like, it has a lot of potential, this thing, but for me, it's an absolute lifesaver. It solves all the timing problems that a setup like this entails.
So. This is providing then directly clock to the sequencers.
So one sequencer is the master clock. This is the master.
That's the master
the squid
clock.
Is the pyramid is the master. This one sends the clock to the multi-clock, and that then distributes it across all the devices.
So everything is basically aligning everything to this clock.
Yeah, and that brings me to another issue. That's the last issue that I would like to mention. I realized that all the sequences that I came across so far have the issue that when you load a new project, a new track in the sense, they cut out. They stop sending.
There's no way to load a second thing.
Yeah,
and
there now is. There is now, like a few weeks ago, Squarp released the oh God, what's it called? The Apex, which basically is 2 sequencers in one box with 2 displays, 2 CPUs, and so forth to solve exactly this problem. The Pyramid can do one thing that the others can't, because even it can send out a steady clock even while loading a new file. And when it has loaded the new file will kind of recognize the playhead of the clock that's still playing and start on the bar.
Okay, that's why that's the master.
Exactly.
Cool. Whether we should be using master and slave as terms has also been thrown into question.
No, but seriously, I mean,
but
seriously, I mean,
true.
Language constructs reality, right? I meant to be cognizant of that. It bloody says. I'm not going to repeat the word, but it bloody says the word.
Well, when it's become a standardized nomenclature, it's difficult to move away from it because things are labelled like that. But it's been raised several times, and it's like so many cases where you
I
just
apologize.
don't ever think about it.
Yeah, well, but I have already thought of it.
You
So
have,
leader and follower, you could just as
leader
easily.
and follower.
Yeah? So this is the leading sequencer, and this is the following. No, but seriously, thank you for raising the issue.
Yes. Well, I mean, we could go on for ages. I'm tempted to. I'm just. Any little gems or any little discoveries that you've made that you'd be happy to share, that sort of within this maze of wiring, some little, if you do that with that, never guess what. I mean, you were explaining this quite clever little FM trick that you were doing to generate this really lovely chippy sound from the...
So never underestimate the power of pulse width modulation, but that's not really a trick that I've... if I could just... praise one more thing where I thought, oh wow, this is amazing. I didn't know that. There's this one module that it's this one. It looks rather weird. It's the Disting EX by Expert Sleepers. Wonderful name. That's why it has these 3 Z's. You know, Expert Sleepers, and they advertise it as like a multi-purpose audio CV module and so forth. But the person, unfortunately, I forgot his name, who is like the mastermind of this company. He keeps putting out firmware updates that massively expand the functionality of this. I was using this originally as a multi-sample player to play back strings. Okay. And the person who runs this company, they just released a firmware update, and now it's a polyphonic wavetable synthesizer that sounds really nice, and it accepts MIDI. So suddenly,
this is part of the same.
Yeah, this is see, it's the extension to that. So suddenly you have a full polyphonic 4-voice synth with MIDI, wonderful filters in analog within there, and you know that is something. I didn't buy it for getting this function. This you just receive this.
Gift.
Yes.
And gift that keeps giving.
And
you have to love things like that. I do. I mean, again, it's one of the amazing benefits of digital world, you know, because I mean, the same with the Novation Peak, released as a certain synth, and then with a firmware update, suddenly it's a wavetable synth as well. And like these massive expansions of capabilities are possible because there's a chip in there.
Okay, but then one last sentence about the
let's knock it off
the analog digital. One last sentence, because this is important to me, right? Because basically you could say, look, like this has a digital heart and this has a digital heart and this as well. Why on earth isn't this all just fancy dress up? I mean, couldn't you bring your laptop? And I mean, I guess you could. However, the thing is, what I really like about modules, I'm not a very clever person when it comes to operating complex musical software. And what I like about this is, for every parameter there is, with very few exceptions, there's a visible, tangible button. Yeah. And if there is not an explicitly labeled visible button, you can't do it. So basically, this is all there is. It's like bringing out all the food.
No, you're right. It seems like a lot, but when you look at your average DAW, the amount of controls and parameters that are available are astronomical.
Much higher, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is actually limiting your parameter space, and throw in a little bit of digital in there, you get the best of both
That's
worlds.
a really strong pro-modular argument there. You nailed it. Well,
Mark,
I think we should leave it there.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming, and
thanks for having me. This was a blast.
Always a
thank
pleasure.
you so much.
And yes, thank you all for joining us. This was the first of our little insights to music producers and creators from our area and beyond. And we hope that you will come back and enjoy our shows in the future. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon. All the best. And bye. And we're still on air, probably.